What do you prefer?
Yeah, use the whole 35 minutes, no problem.
Okay, perfect. What do you prefer?
Hi, everyone. We will be starting soon. Thanks for joining in early. We'll wait for one more minute, and I think I can start with the introductions and other thing by the time folks will join in. Okay, so I think we will be starting now, and hopefully more people will continue to join in, but we will go through all the formalities by the time and before our speakers start the show. So let me resume recording. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to Connections 2024. This is an event which is being organized by IISOC and INTC together. We will go through details about the event. So this is going to be a 4-day event. Each day we will meet at the same time. Today we are dealing with internet technology and governance. We will have more talks about IPv6, network management and observability, and post-quantum security as our other tracks in the upcoming days. We hope that you will join us on all 4 of these days. So let's give a quick introduction to IISOC. I'm sure most of you have been attending our events and already aware of it. But for those who are joining us for the first time, IISOC stands for Indian Internet Engineering Society. It's a non-profit that brings together different stakeholders in the networking space, working for vendor companies, for service providers, even in academia, as well as folks from the regulation, policy, and government side. Our main aim is to increase the awareness and participation in the ITF from our subcontinent, where we see that we have the huge number of internet users, but the number of people who are actually participating in developing of internet standards is very dismal. So how can we do to make sure that there is more awareness, as well as how we can help each other in making sure that more of us participate in the ITF? So that was the vision by which IISOC was started. We have received grants in the past, so we are thankful for folks who have supported us, especially ISEF Asia and APNIC Foundation. We have partnered with various institutes, INTC and NITK Suratkal being one of them. So you can find more details about our little organization at iisoc.in. INTC is another nonprofit. The main aim of this nonprofit is focus on the enterprise issues and how do we bring enterprise, academia, and government organization together to promote education and collaboration on various internet standards in a vendor-neutral environment. So the main aim when we started this organization was looking at the participation of enterprises and the enterprise issues within when the protocol development is taking place is little less. Our aim was again to make sure that we bridge that gap, do various webinars, do various technical discussions where we can help the standards as well as the enterprises and other less focused groups at the ITF as well. We do a lot of webinars. We have been also receiving grant from Aaron, especially, and we are very grateful for their support. You'll find more details at industrynetcouncil.org. Connections is our premier event that we do, for a while now. We started back in 2017. It was done as a physical event earlier with various places in Bangalore and Kolkata, especially when the ITF was happening in our neighborhood like Bangkok or Singapore. We thought that having a pre-event in India would work out quite well. And we have been doing this as an online event since 2020. And this is the another online version. At this next one, we are hoping to make it physical. So let's hope that you will all support us and we will get back to physical meeting soon. So this one, as I said, is a 4-day event. We have various different interesting topics, a really good set of speakers, and I hope you enjoy the event. Before we kick off connections, we just wanted to give an intro to folks who are joining in for the first time to make them aware of other things that we do. We organize various webinars. In the past year, we organized webinars focusing on IPv6 deployment and security. You can find all these information on our website. You have the videos, slides, everything readily available. So please use the material that's already out there. IISOC does another meetup, which is called RFCs We Love. Here, again, our aim was making ITF specifications and RFC easier to digest. People can come in with their idea, RFCs that they have implemented, or a draft that they want to push, and have a friendly way to present and discuss ideas within our small community, and also finding connections so that we can help each other out at the standards body as well. So this RFCs We Love has also been going on for a long time. And if you have ideas or this, please reach out to us. We will love to organize more meetups based on your thoughts on what would be interesting to our community. As our common aim has been to increase ITF participation in India, we do a lot of interesting things. One of the major projects that we have taken is increasing IPv6 deployment. We started with IPv6 training, which we did as a series of webinars first. And then with the help of NITK, Suratkal, which is one of the big campuses, still running on IPv4, though IPv6 in India at the service provider level has good visibility. But again, like rest of the world, at the enterprise level, at the campus level, the IPv6 deployment is less. And NITK Suratkal is pioneering this, how to deploy IPv6 within their giant campus and led by students, which is again a huge thing, that it's a student-led deployment work where students themselves are creating labs, making mechanism, testing, and then going ahead and deploying in their physical physical campus as well. So this is a huge learning for the students as well as for us. And the good thing is we have taken their experiences to V6 Ops in ITF, where again it was very well received by the community as well. And I think tomorrow at the IPv6 talk, Nalini will go over a little bit more in detail about what we have done in this space. So IPv6 is not the only one. We do little bit security. So DALT is another new still to be formed working group, which is focusing on location tracker. So again, with this bunch of students, this work is being done. We also are looking at a lot more EBF development with the students. So a lot of interesting things. And again, PDM has been a topic that a lot of students and I saw because of its enterprise interest have invested a lot of effort in it. So these are various little things that we have been doing. Before we start, we wanted to have a quick news from ITF as well. Like we want to bring in what is the latest thing that has happened. A new development at ITF, we have a new area. As you know, ITF is divided into multiple areas: general area, routing area, security area. So one of the a new area we have, which is called WIT. It stands for Web and Internet Transport. Basically, the idea is some of the working group from transports and some of the working group from art, which is application and real time, are being merged into a new area called WIT, and the transport area is being closed down. So basically, the ITF leadership sometimes reorganize the ITF structure, and this is one of the latest thing that has happened, and it will go live in the upcoming ITF. Another set of things that I wanted to introduce is some of the new work that has started at ITF. And as you know, sometimes it's easier to get involved at the newer when the work is still new rather than a working group that has a lot of history. So that's why to our community, we want to just introduce this. And if this is your area of interest, as a developer, as a researcher, or just an area that you want to get involved in, so this would be a very good time to join the mailing list and start participating. The first one is DALT, which stands for Detecting Unwanted Location Tracker. Again, it's looking at the security and privacy implication of trackers, locating them. There are various issues with this, which are already in the news. In fact, it was news in India as well. So all the location tracker networks and manufacturers wants to fix this issue. And they're coming to ITF to standardize this, so that everyone follows the same standard and best practices are being used across the location trackers network. So DALT working group most likely will get chartered before the next ITF. So this will be a good one. We have two identity related one. One is called SPICE and WISME. Again, identity is becoming a very important topic, the digital identity, digital credentials, not just because of the technology, but we have seen during COVID times, during regulations from some of the governments, that this space is going to become very, very critical. And again, digital human identity as well as the identity of workloads in the cloud environment, both of them are equally important. And these two working groups will try to solve this problem. Right now, again, both of them are under charter. They had the BOF discussion in the previous ITF. A BOF is basically a pre-working group discussion where ITF decides whether the problem space makes sense, whether ITF is the right community to fix this problem, is the charter clear, things like that. And NMOP is in fact our latest working group that has recently been chartered last week itself. It stands for Network Management Operations, and we have a network observability track which will deal with some of the issues that this working group is chartered for. So main aim is that network management is changing rapidly. ITF worked on creation of Yang, a lot of Yang model. There is already NetConf, RESTConf, but still we need a full operations guide on how to use these tools that already existed, as well as because of telemetry, because of the network observability need, there is a lot more dynamic things that are happening in the operations area. And this ops working group, which means that they will not be working on actual protocols, but they will be more focusing on looking at the requirements and understanding what's happening in this space. And then our upcoming ITF 119, which is going to be in Brisbane. At least the time zone is going to be very good for us comparatively. You won't have to be late. Maybe you have to wake up early, which is a different experience, but still, I hope more of you will join. As you know, remote participation, you can get a fee waiver if you can't be there in person. So at least try and join us remotely. And APNIC is sponsoring, so this is the good thing for our Asia Pacific side of the world. We hope to see good participation when the meetings happen in our corners. These are various details. I'll put this thing in chat, so don't worry. ISOC runs as a membership. You can become a member. It's free to become a member. You can join our mailing list. Our ITF India group and WhatsApp is quite active. You can join it and ask questions, get help, all that stuff. INTC runs on supporters. So you can join us as a supporter and then again attend our webinars, workshops. And of course, we are on social media, so try and follow us there as well. And that's it. I will now move on to the main thing that you guys are here for, which is let's talk about connections. So the first day of connections, we have Amrita and Simone. The track is focusing on how internet technology and governance and policy cannot work in silos anymore, and how we are all connected to each other, how one impact the other so much. And that's why we are deviating from our maybe tech-focused rest of the connections to focus more on this topic, which I hope you guys will find very, very interesting. And it is very timely and important for us at the technology side, as well as the folks who are looking at policy side, to get involved in each other's areas and stop working in silos at all times. So this is going to be our main message for today. We have IPv6 track focusing on IPv6 deployment at Alibaba Cloud, and Tommy will focus on Happy Eyeball, which is a pretty interesting and useful thing that you guys would have already been using. And Tommy is proposing an update to it. So what's the need? All that stuff we will go through in tomorrow's IPv6 track. We have a network observability track. In this, we are doing this more as a small presentations by each of the panelists and followed by panel discussion, bringing in folks from enterprise, from academia, from enterprise service providers, ISPs, all of them looking at what is network observability for them and what is the key problem they are looking at solving at. So this is going to be a pretty good discussion on day 3. And finally, post-quantum security track, again, very important hot topic. We have really good 2 speakers who would explain to you why this is so critical, why is it important, and also how would that impact security in the coming days. So this is our whole connections program. I hope you will join us on all 4 of these days. So first, before we kick off, I want to thank all our speakers and panelists and everybody who registers are joining us now, and as well as every one of you who is listening to this on YouTube at a later date. Thank you. We run this as a webinar, so you can ask questions by clicking on Q&A, and you can write down your question there, which will also help us to track the questions and easily able to handle. But in case you want to speak, that's also okay. You can just indicate that via a comment that you would like to be unmuted, and we can unmute you and you would be able to ask your questions directly as well. So both modes are okay. Our preference is for Q&A, especially when there are a lot of questions, but otherwise feel free to just indicate and we will unmute you. For any general introduction with each other and just normal talking, use the chat function. And that way you will be able to interact with the other people who are attending this webinar as well. So via this administrative year done, let's just kick off our day 1. Welcome. And our first talk is by Amrita Chaudhary, which is the key message of intersection of tech and policy and taking Indian perspective, especially the laws and the regulations that are happening in India, the things that you might already be seeing in Indian news, and how is that going to be impact from both from the technology and from the policy point of view. Amrita is an active participant at various different global bodies. She serves as a director of CCAOE. She is chair for APR IGF. She is at IGFSA, ICANN. A lot of interesting things that she has been involved in. Within India, she has been involved in INSIG, Indian IGF, Youth IGF as well, and she served in the UN IGF MAG member. So she's one of our top expert that I know, and I've known her for a while. So it's really nice to have her at Connections, and we want to now ask her to explain to us what's happening. And feel free to ask lots of questions. Keep this interactive, and let's kick off Connections. I'll stop sharing, and Amrita, go ahead and you will share.
Thanks, Dhruv, and hi, everyone. And you gave a very flattering introduction. I hope I stay, to that. It was quite a elaborate one, but thank you for having me here. And as Dhruv mentioned, I would obviously want it to be interactive. The tech part of the story, and you are also reading certain things, or as a user, you come across various issues when you use the internet or technology. And as Dhruv mentioned, many times you think, oh, this is something which policy people will deal, or when it comes to technology, many policy people feels, oh no, that's a very techie thing, we will not go. But unfortunately, internet has kind of broken those barriers, and many times we see regulations which for us is concerning, and that is why both sides need that support. And I think it's a very apt discussion which Dhruv and Nalini thought about, and the others at ISOC. And thank you for having me here. And please feel free to ask questions. I'll look at the chat later, but please feel free to ask questions, etc. And I'll be happy to take them. And if I look at technology, I would say that technology has been an integral part of progress. It has even reached to the I would say even the unconnected people, changing lives. And COVID actually brought a drastic change in most of the Indian lives. Today, even a vegetable seller, for example, takes money through mobile banking facilities, say GPay or any UPI. Even if they do not know how to read and write properly, these are things which they are doing. So it has a transformative quality which has transformed our life, but it has also ushered in new kinds of issues, which lawmakers and everyone is trying to grapple with. So there is a good side and the bad side. We want to harness and leverage technology and internet, and that is why the debate or the discussions are more on what can we do after that. So if you look at the present tech scenario or how the world is structured, we have new tech powers coming up. Normally, if you looked at the technology companies, they were mostly Americans, but now you see a shift. You see a lot of new technology companies coming up, say from China, for example, or even some growing in India. So there is a change in the tech power, and it will keep on changing. And this has also, to a certain extent, given rise to geopolitics. For example, the chip wars you see everywhere, the Quad, which is now expanding to have even India out there, the blocks which are, at play. You see the sanctions coming, the counter sanctions coming. So there is a growing geopolitics, and this is going to be there. You'll have the next speaker speaking on the Russia-Ukraine tensions also, which is also leading to a lot of geopolitics, and regulations are being affected. Then we see the rise of big tech. Now, you see the power they have. While they have brought convenience into our lives, we also see them when they flex their muscles, it becomes a challenge. We see antitrust cases coming up. We also have seen questions of accountability of data, privacy coming up. For example, data of children being used without consent, etc. So those concerns are rising. Then you have the concerns of countries, which is like the national security concerns. You see nowadays cyber criminals are not just limited to some gangs attacking from somewhere. You see state sponsored attacks happening. So countries are concerned. We see the solar wind kind of issues. We also see issues which recently happened with the orange in Spain, wherein the RIPE NCC account was hacked and the system was stopped for 3 hours. So and these attacks are growing. Similarly, if you look at governments, for example, even in India, the concern is how to protect the rights of citizens and their interest. Many a times what happens is, when there is a cybercrime or when there is questioning happen, some company sitting somewhere else says, no, we are not in your jurisdiction. But for a country also, they have to protect the rights. So how can that happen? Because cross-border jurisdiction is a challenge even today. And we are also seeing a rise in hate speech, privacy and security breaches. Every day you will hear some kind of a privacy breach or security breach happening. And you see political interference. You see the Snowden effect, you see the others which are happening. So we are all witnessing these. Now, what is happening is technology is changing, things are changing, and the regulations, even in India, which were made for some time back, is not being able to cope up with it. So that is why we are also seeing many existing regulations which are being rehauled, and there are new regulations which are in the pipeline or being drafted, or some strategies being made. Like if we look at last year, we had the Competition Bill amended. We also had the Digital Personal Data Protection Act being passed after several years of wait. We saw the IT rules being amended. There were new regulations brought in to actually make the social media companies, etc., more accountable, to kind of see how fake news, misinformation can be curbed to a certain extent. We have the Telecommunication Act recently rehauled. Similarly, we have the Indian Penal Code, etc., being rehauled by the last 3 regulations. There is also discussions, as in the discussions did start, but we don't know whether the discussions will continue now or after the elections they will start, which we think would be the case, that the IT Act is going to be amended by the Digital India Act. It would be a complete rehaul of the IT Act, which governs technology, internet, etc. And just like UK, the EU, India also wants to bring in a Digital Competition Act for reining the big tech. There was a small group which was formed, CDCL, who gave a report. The report is yet to come out, but obviously we are expecting more consultations to happen. And obviously for a country like India, who is aspiring, we need to have a cybersecurity strategy. Though the inputs were taken many years back, we are yet to see that happening, but we are still waiting. Now, if you look at these regulations, many of them had some kind of stakeholder discussion or comments being taken. For example, the Telecommunication Act or the IT rules, or the DPDP, which is the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. However, like the Competition Amendment Bill, the final draft was never seen. It was just placed in the Parliament without anyone having a view. Now, many of them have concerning aspects. And I will go into it in a bit. And this is where, why you also need to be involved. The challenge today is the policies need to be future-proof. Like it's always tech is always ahead by the time a policy is formed. But when policies are being framed, they need to be framed with a futuristic view. It should not be too stifling that it kind of stifles innovation or stifles businesses from working, yet it should protect user interest. It should be rights respecting, and should possibly have privacy by design. Like many a times the human rights aspects of people kind of are overlooked when regulations are made. It needs to be nuanced. It has to be balanced. For example, the telecommunication regulations, for example, gives, I would say, broad discretionary powers to the government. For example, to intercept, to detain messages, or to impose shutdowns. While the minister in his speech has said that there would be, the following draft of these regulations, which are going to come out, would have independent oversight or accountability, but it is not evident in the draft, in the act. So those are concerning bits, like, okay, if the government is, as a sovereign, has to protect the interests of users, national security, they can do so. But what are the checks and balances? How do you ensure these regulations are not misused, or there is censorship, which is also a concern these days? So, are there adequate accountability and transparency in the system? And does this particular regulation cause minimum unintended harm? For example, if I look at the Telecommunications Act, it says that if the government wants, and it's not I'm not saying verbatim, it says that it can suggest the encryption standards. Now, the concern is globally there are some, and you all asked people from technology working on standards, etc. There are some standardized encryption policies or standards which are used. Now, if a separate standard is being asked to be implemented without discussions, etc., that could be concerning. It's not been asked at this point of time, but if that happens, what then? And that is where perhaps people like you who are, into technical community, into standards, etc., needs to speak out. Additionally, the need of the hour is to create awareness and capacity building amongst different stakeholders. It could be users, it could be senior citizens, it could be the regulators themselves, it could be law enforcement at different level as to how technology works and how to use technology to counter technology. And I'll give you an example. Say, for example, a judge passes, and it has happened, a judge, and I will share this later, and Nalini had also discussed it with Dhruv some time back, that there was Reuters came out with an article about a particular company using compromising systems to get in data from other companies for some of their clients. And what actually happened is this company took this case to the Delhi court. And the Delhi court, in a preliminary ruling, the Delhi court said that, look, since this is still under investigation, this needs to be taken down. This article needs to be taken down across jurisdiction. So what happened is Reuters complied to this particular mandate, took it down, and simultaneously this article came down from across the globe. So no one could actually look at it, and this company actually invested a lot of money in different jurisdictions to ensure that it is ensured. So what actually was supposed to be limited to this particular thing actually had a far-reaching effect. Similarly, some early last year, some domains, there was a cyber squatting issue, etc., and some domain names were identified, and they were supposed to be blocked by the orders of the court. Now, what happened is, while blocking it, 4 other domain name companies, etc., globally were blocked out. So the issue which I'm trying to raise is that many times, even judges, due to limited understanding of technology or how things impact, make, I would say, pass judgment which could have unintended harm. Similarly, if you look at the various shutdowns which happens of internet, now many times the magistrates in the district level are not able to see how to stop it. For example, there is a particular information which has become viral. Or let me take a flimsy excuse. there is an examination somewhere, and the authorities think that there is a high chance of cheating happening. So what they do is they shut down the internet. Now, shutting down the internet is actually shutting down the internet for everyone, every opportunity gone, everything gone for people. Whereas there may be a different way to actually manage this issue. It is only because of not understanding how technology works, and the thought that, okay, if I close the tap, it is going to work. So those kind of capacity building awareness needs to happen. Similarly, that you don't just bring up an encryption standard. There are processes happening, and why a standardized encryption is standard is much better than trying to customize is required. It is required at different level. And it is also important for regulators or even judiciary or law enforcement to have more discussions with different stakeholders, not in silos, but together. For example, policy people may think of it in a particular way. Certain things may be right, certain things may be wrong. Technology people, when they think, they may be thinking it from a different way. But if the different stakeholder communities sit together and try to analyze the issue, I think we could find out more nuanced approaches. And that's why I again reiterate that tech and policy in today's time cannot work in silos because they are intertwined. From that, I would like to go into, there are many ongoing debates, but a few which I thought would be of interest is one of them is the shutdown, which I alluded to earlier. We have the largest shutdowns in the world. Obviously, we have a large population, our issues are different. Due to the large population and information going viral can cause havoc. Sometimes law enforcement may not have issues, may not have any other alternative but to shut down the internet. However, we know that internet shutdowns have an economic cost. They have a massive effect on the lives of people, for example, health, education, business. And so this is something of a concern. While, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India came up with a paper wherein they asked, should there be selective shutdown as a solution? Personally, I do not even like this solution of any kind of shutdown. I feel that internet should be flowing. But perhaps the conversation should be that rather than shutting down the internet, what are the alternatives that can be worked, which can help to reduce the concerns of law enforcement or to manage these kind of situations? And I think that is where the technical community can come up with more nuanced solutions that look, just switching off the internet is not going to solve the issue. There would be other modes in which it flows. Simultaneously, if there is a viral information which is flowing, how can you counter it? For example, when there is a flood, the same system is being used to warn people, during COVID also, the same social media, the same messaging apps were used for social good. So how can you turn the tables is something which is also important to kind of think about. If we are talking about, say, for example, selective shutdown, who decides what is selective? Will it lead to censorship? So those are certain concerns which come. For example, for the examinations, isn't there a better way to deal with it than shutting down the internet? So these are certain questions which are being debated, and it would be great if the technical community could come up with some alternative solutions and explain it, which perhaps with the support of policy people could be placed to the government, etc. And honestly, even the government authorities, etc., if you speak to them, they say, what is the solution? Give us a solution. So that's one. The other one is on network usage fees. This is not a new topic of discussion. It has come up several times. It went to the ITU long back. It's been discussed in the EU, wherein the telecom companies are saying, look, to the OTT players that look, we are investing hugely in 5G technology, etc., and you are freely riding on our pipes. You need to pay us some money. Now, the challenge with this is there are many challenges. One, it is the user who pays the telecom operator for the internet connectivity. It is the user who is wanting the content. So, my position, I would say, is that they have the telecom companies and the OTT applications have a symbiotic relationship. One cannot survive without the other. For example, for the OTTs, they need a a connectivity to reach their end user. Similarly, for telecom, the voice business or the SMS has shrunk. Internet is where they, from where people use them, I would say. For me at home, I use a WhatsApp call more than my mobile call because sometimes I don't get signal. And sometimes it's more clear, I get more features, etc. I can have multiple people joining in, do a video call, etc. All that stuff. This argument is, since, say for example, and this was being discussed in EU also, they came up with a paper, but no conclusive position, and they said they would be looking at it more. In India, the challenge with the telcos is their auction prices are high, the spectrum prices are high, the deployment is a challenge. So the argument, at least from our end, has been that modify these regulations for telcos, just as telecom providers are investing in their networks. Even the application providers or the OTTs are investing in their networks. They are investing in deep sea cables or CDNs, etc. And the connectivity or the way the packet moves from the OTT to the telco is just not it. There is an entire ecosystem, and if you look at the expenses in the entire ecosystem, it is going to be it's much more higher. Both sides are investing in it. If you look at Korea, they introduced some kind of a network usage fees, but the concern is, some companies which, for example, is exiting Korea. And Korea is a gaming company, and the gaming part of Microsoft is kind of said they cannot do business. And many of the companies are routing their, their content through Japan. So the latency increases, or the cost to the users would increase. Now in India, for example, COAI, which is the Cellular Authority of India, representing the telcos, obviously we now have two main telcos and one which is Vodafone Idea, came up with a paper saying, and they termed it as the large LTGs, as in the big ones like Netflix, WhatsApp, Meta, Microsoft, etc., who are the large traffic generators, they should pay and not others. But then this also gives rise to the network neutrality. What if priority is given to these traffic? What happens to the others? While they're saying the startups don't have to pay, but again, how does it work? And we also need to realize that the telcos and OTTs, by default, they have business understanding and they have handshaking and money moving. This is trying to legitimize something which is a bit concerning. And this is also where perhaps, apart from the economics, the technical community can give the technical arguments like that, look, this is how it works and this is how it does not work. There is not a given answer, but there could be solutions found, but definitely one paying the other doesn't make sense in this, because both are actually, it would result in double dipping because the customer is already paying for it. The other issue out here I would like to raise is encryption. So if you look at it, globally, law enforcement have been concerned about trying to, access encrypted communication, especially due to, say, I would say, cyber criminals, I would say national security issues, the CSAM, which is the child sexual abuse material, etc. for that, because the concern is that many of this flows through encrypted platform. However, there is also an argument that if you break, and interestingly, the discussion is such in India also, the policy papers of the government would say, we do not want to break encryption. However, we need access to the information. Or client-side scanning or traceability features, which is again a concern, because if you are allowing that, anyone else could be able to access that information. However, at times, law enforcement is also right. They say we need that information. We know that there may be some terrorists sending some content. And what actually happens even in the terrorist content is first the recruitment is done in a different way, but later on the conversations then move to encrypted platform or even satellite based places where it cannot be seen. So how do they without breaking encryption, how can the user privacy be protected, protect the users as well as the national security? Because if you look at it, CSAM abuses are increasing. And they also happen through encrypted platforms. But if encryption is there, it also protects people. So how do, what could be the solutions, or what could be, there is no answer to it. Breaking encryption may not also be the solution to all problems. So how do you deal with these kind of an issue is another such thing. The other is the issue of deepfakes and misinformation. Many of you in India must have been hearing about the conversations on deepfake, Narayan Murthy, Sachin Tendulkar, or even the actress Rashmika, whose deepfakes were made, etc. And especially since we are going into elections this year, and there are another more 54 countries which are going into election, this is concerning. Now, we do have regulations in the IT Act, which to a certain extent helps in the fake news, misinformation, or impersonation issues. However, the Minister of State, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, was mentioning that regulations on deepfakes and misinformation would come in. Now, on one hand, it is good. On the other hand, are we sure we know the size of the beast and whether these regulations will be able to curb it, or are we going to bring in more censorship? If you bring in too many stringent regulations at times, it may be misused by and may result in censorship. So that is also a concern, especially during election times, because many times the party in power may try to misuse that power. So these are certain concerns. Fake news and misinformation is a huge issue. Whether technology or regulations will be able to solve it is a concern, because if you look at misinformation and fake news, it has been there from ages. It's just that technology and internet has magnified it manifold, and things go viral and actually leads to a lot of issues. The other thing, since we have the Data Protection Act, which is coming in, is age verification. For example, as per our regulations, anyone below 18 needs consent, adult consent. Now, in a country like India, where parents I'm talking about literate parents, make the Facebook profile as soon as the child is born and put in 13 for the child at that point of time, expecting all parents to be aware of what their children is doing online or giving meaningful consent is a concern. And there are, I would say, many more parents who are not literate or not tech savvy. How do you expect them to give consent for their children's use of everything? So while we had proposed a graded approach, because children who are 16 to 18, I would say young adults, would not want to be considered like those who are below 13. The risks are different to have a graded approach, but again, I don't think that's working. But how do you have it? Should it be Aadhaar based? Should it be some other way based? Because these are concerns, as in what is the best way to verify, because there is also a concern that it may be misused, or someone may hack into the system and take all the data, etc. And we also want children's rights not to be crushed. So these are certain things which I thought, some developments which I thought I would raise with you, that which are being discussed. Obviously, there are much more, but these were certain things I thought. And I would say that your involvement in these discourses are important. And if you want to be, you can be updated through newsletters, through policy discussions, share your views on forums. You could participate passively first in tech policy discussions, and then actively, get into those. Share your views when consultations are on. And, there are various forums, for example, at the regional level also. Share the experiences, what you feel. If you think you want to make a workshop and submit, you could do so even in APR IGF, or INSEG, or the other places which we have. If you feel there is a topic which you think should be discussed, you can reach out to Dhruv, me, etc. I will leave my email ID so you can reach out to me. I will stop my screen sharing so that I can see what is there in the chat, and if there are any questions, Dhruv, if you could help me with that. And I think I am kind of done. I will share some links here, but I'm open for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Amrita. We have one question, but before we go into that, I will just request other people to just put in their questions or raise their hands if they want to talk. Let's have a conversation. We have at least 10 to 15 minutes to do that. So let's do that. So first question that I can see is, are there any suggested models for tech and policy to work together and they don't remain in silos? So what will be the model in which this cooperation can happen?
Yeah, thanks, Mohib, for that question. And I would say, even these kind of panels, wherein you say, for example, this was just a teaser of some of the questions which have come. Sharing information, for example, if we are doing some event normally from CCUI, if there is a policy regulation which is being discussed, we try to explain it by bringing in people. So we can share those invites. You can join, hear those discourses. You can give your comment. Initially, you may not feel, sometimes you may not feel so confident, or you may be hesitant, like, look, will I sound right? Will I sound wrong or something? But there's nothing of that kind. You can share your views. Many times when we are making submissions, we also share it with people, or the event report. You can share your comments, or what we could do is possibly have collaborations, like now, which I think of is, if we want to have a conversation on, say, internet shutdown, I reach out to you all through Dhruv and say, look, Dhruv, what is the solution for an internet shutdown? What could be the places? And possibly then have some law enforcement or some others, the larger community come in and speak. We could have some technical speakers sharing their views. We could also have some policy people saying, like, okay, this works, this doesn't work. And we could also have government people hearing it. Sometimes governments may want to come in under Chatham House rules, but I would not say there is a clear-cut recipe. I think we have to keep on trying to kind of see, not every time every recipe may work, but sometimes some recipes work, sometimes some do not. And I think that conversation has to keep flowing.
Yeah, and thanks, Amrita. And just to add to this, maybe from my ITF leadership hat on, this is something that within the ITF we have been trying. At every ITF meeting, we now have a policy roundtable, again under the Chatham House rules, try to invite the regulators local to that area. For instance, this time when we are meeting in Australia, even in Australia, the Australian encryption law and other things are very, very hot. So we are inviting those people to come and participate in ITF, not so attend the ITF meeting, but we could have conversations on the side where we can understand each other's limitations and where they are coming from and have frank conversations. And I think that's the only way forward for us to have more conversations and understand each other a little better. And just so that I can continue, I see Nalini has a question. And before I pass on to Nalini, I wanted to have one tiny questions as well, especially since you brought down the shutdown thing. With shutdown, especially, I always thought them as more of a legal issue in the sense the laws, and maybe you can correct me if my understanding is incorrect, in the sense it was the Indian laws that allows for a blanket internet shutdown much easier rather than something else where the idea of net neutrality or some other things come up inside. What that means is it's mainly the laws which are the bottleneck rather than technology. Would that be the right way to look at especially the internet shutdown, mainly because they are done when they are done at, for instance, a small district level where a district administrator has those laws to apply, where he might not be able to apply anything else because that's the only hammer he has, and he's going to use the only hammer he is given. So maybe you can give us a little bit more thoughts
Yeah,
on.
so net neutrality, etc. If you go and talk, they'll say, "वो सब बाकी बात है." Let's get into this. The challenge, I would say they think of the internet as a water pipe. Okay, so if the tap is open, let me close it, the issue will solve. Because they do not have an alternative way to manage the situation. Okay, I understand that some message has gone, it's very critical at one point of time. Amongst the, say, 100, I'm just taking a ballpark figure of shutdown, you will see hardly 3, 4, or 5 maybe really severe. Others are on the pretext of anything. It could be elections, it could be examinations, it could be anything. So I would say that they think this is the tool in their hand, yes, because the laws allow them to do so. But it is also their helplessness which makes them use that. There is no other alternative, so let me do this, let me switch off the tap. So that's how it is.
Yeah, Nalini, go ahead. And Shraddha, I've given you the permission. Once Nalini has asked your questions, you can also perhaps maybe ask the questions live. So off to you, Nalini.
Yeah, thanks, Dhruv. And Amrita, thanks very much for this conversation. So, because I was thinking as you were talking, is yes, I agree with what you're saying, but how to do is the question, and maybe this is a conversation that we can take offline with IISOC board, INTC board, because these conversations are quite complex. It's not so easy to say, come in and do things. I mean, I've participated at the UN Internet Governance Forum, and they did some roundtable on encryption. And after about 5 minutes, it was very clear to me that none of them had any idea of how encryption actually worked. And it's a very tricky situation because even in ourselves, I mean, okay, so for example, there's a new messaging protocol, the message layer security protocol, it's a new cryptographic protocol. I've spent 2 years myself, and I have 30 years experience. I've spent 2 years myself trying to understand exactly how it works, what the implications are. So this is a very tricky issue, and especially as we go now into post-quantum, many things, even IPv6. So what I'm thinking, maybe we can take offline and maybe just do some trial things. Take one topic and say, okay, let's explain from technical point of view and let's explain from policy point of view, and then have a discussion. Because any topic you pick is very, very complex. Does this make sense to you?
Yes, Nalini, it is very, I completely resonate with you on this, because these are not a 0-1 game. There are so many dimensions and things are changing And it is important to have these conversations and even have a sideline, how to work on it, because many a times the message is, look, all the pictures of the puzzle is not there, to tell the government, hold it. We know that it is a concern of yours, but these are also issues, and let's try to figure it out in a better, I would say in a more nuanced way. You can't say they're wrong, but you can say that, look, let's relook at it. And I'm happy to have this conversation and have these kind of discussions, because I think it's important. And I would be happy to, have these discussions, and, we can have a separate conversation, plan up something, because these are conversations which are needed to actually demystify technology for, I would say the people, the decision makers and others, that this is how it works, this is how it does not work.
I think that's great. Let's take offline, because I think those of us who are involved in creating the standards, we can make it so that I think other people can understand. And that's what we've been trying to do at the enterprise level too. Say, this is coming out. What are the implications for your networks? That's what we've been trying to do at INTC. Maybe we can do a similar thing, is what is the implication on policy level? Because we can see, but we need to collaborate so that we get the people involved, because we don't know those people, and those people. Thank you so much, Amrita.
I think maybe partnering with ISOC folks would be the best one, because I've seen this firsthand, how some ISOC folks are very good in translating the technology into policy speak, and are able to put the same points that we technology folks may use only technology terms, and which is sometimes difficult to decipher. So I hope working more with across various different things is the way forward. Okay, last question, maybe Shraddha, and then we will move to the next presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dhruv. This is Shraddha for the record. Great presentation, Amrita. I had a question which flowed from something that you just said in response to Nalini's question. You said we need to demystify technology for decision makers and others. And that's a wonderful way of putting it. It's a great phrase. My question was, since I come from a purely policy perspective and purely legal analysis of all things tech, my experience has been that you tend to find these one or two people in the field who can help you out, who you ask over and over again about what is happening, and you come off as a completely ignorant person, regardless of what your knowledge base is, say in the understanding of laws of the country or of understanding the rights-based perspective that you were talking about. So I just wanted to ask you, are there a few ways in which people who are coming from both of these, people who are coming purely from a tech background, people who are coming from a purely a policy background, can sort of start learning a little bit from each other and try to dip into it without feeling like a completely ignorant person, because that will so quickly transform into imposter syndrome and they drop out of the field. This is a problem that we're seeing in a lot of next generation leaders who come in all guns blazing and then tend to drop out because they don't really understand what's going on.
No, that's always been a challenge, Shraddha, because there is a volunteer burnout also. And especially for the younger people, because they have to set their careers also. There are many priorities which go on. So there are forums like Shraddha, we try to have more conversations, for example, at the Youth India IGF. They are supposed to be having more such conversations for the young people. There are other, I would say, forums where these are being discussed. Perhaps, say to understand technology, etc. Perhaps I would say at a global level, for read the Diplo mails, newsletters, etc., which are great source of information or updates. To begin with, at beginners level, read the Diplo's book on internet governance. It gives you a basic level understanding of things. Follow the conversations at various places in India, for example, in terms of tech policy. you could refer to the Media Naba newsletters. You could refer to, they have discussions happening. The Internet Freedom Foundation also has some discussions happening. We do our discussions. Normally within civil societies, we know who's doing something or the other, and we kind of we promote each other. It's not like someone is doing, we don't do kind. Similarly, documents come out from the dialogue, etc. From CCOI, what we try to do is we try to collate these things into a newsletter, and we try to give the information at a higher level in a capsule dose, so that people, whoever is interested in a particular thing, for example, they can choose what they want to read, view. We give the links, etc., so that they can go and read it. For example, another thing is the high-level advisory board on AI, which has been formed by the UN Secretary General. Now they came up with a draft report, interim report. The final report should come out by early summer. Now they are asking for inputs. Though it's a policy document, perhaps even technical community may want to look at it. It discusses, for example, you have the Summit of the Future also, which is being discussed. And there are various aspects. Technology also happens to be. Now, the concern is many places, the multilateral system is being promoted, being a UN body. Now, for internet to work, it is not a multilateral system which will work. It has always been working on a multi-stakeholder way, where you have the technologists working, where you have the business who have been promoting it, civil society has been there. So nation states, for example, taking a decision without involving the different stakeholders in the country is a concern. Like the Global Digital Compact negotiations, initial discussions will start in March. The final discussions will happen somewhere in May, June, and September is the Summit of the Future, where the nation states would be signing it. Now, how many in India, for example, the government has taken a done a consultation with the technical community? Because that you have access in technology, you have misinformation, disinformation, fragmentation, access, whole lot of environment, sustainability. How many technical community people have been consulted? Or, for example, how many civil society people have been consulted? And this discussion would, the negotiations would happen in New York, where the New York, the Ministry of External Affairs, the New York Bureau would be signing on it. Whereas technology is looked after by Ministry of Electronics and IT, and a telecom part by Department of Telecom. So where is the conversation?
Thanks. Sorry to cut you off there, but let's move to the next presentation. It was a very good discussion. Excellent question, Shraddha. And let's move to our next presentation. Thank you. Let me share quickly. Yes, so let me just quickly introduce our next speaker. Our next topic is how internet censorship changed in Russia during the first year of military conflict in Ukraine. So this is a more of a conversation where we will focus on measurement techniques and trying to look at how do we look at the impact of this tech policies on the world and the geopolitical issues out there. Simone has been working with UNI, which is a free software project that measures internet censorship worldwide. They have an amazing tool set, which Simone will give an introduction to. And he currently maintains the network measurement engine and leads the network measurement research work at UNI. So off to you, Simone. Let's look forward to another great talk as part of our day one of connections. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Okay, I'll also start sharing my screen. It should be sharing right now. And you should see the slides, and you should also probably see the laser pointer, which will be useful throughout the presentation. Okay, so welcome. I'm Simone, and as Dhruv said, I work at UNI. What I'm going to tell you about today is this research report that we wrote about how the landscape of censorship changing in Russia during the first year of the military conflict. And when I usually do these kind of talks, I am given a quite finite and a small slice of time, so I tend to jump straight to the conclusion, but I'm very grateful and happy that I have slightly more time, because that will allow me to build and explain it such that when we arrive at discussing the report proper, I have laid out all the concepts that are required to understand it, and I don't need to cut corners. So I'm very happy about this. The first thing I want to tell you is about us, and very quickly, there are 3 things that we do. So first of all, we are a non-profit and we write free software. And UNI means Open Observatory of Network Interference, and we were founded in 2012. Now, the first thing we do is free software, and it's an application called UniProbe, and people can install this application, and we will see they can install it on mobile, they can install it on desktop, or there is a command line tool. And this application contains a suite of network experiments that measure mostly censorship. And by default, and this is the second thing we do, so by default, UniProbe submits measurements, and those measurements go to our backend. We process them in real time, we organize them, and we have a website called Uni Explorer that shows all the data that we have collected. Third thing that we do is writing research reports, which is what we are going eventually to be discussing today. But okay, so I would like to tell you a bit about the UniProbe tool first, and then I will move towards Uni Explorer, our methodology, and then finally the report proper, trying to build all the foundation to have this conversation. So, as you can guess from these URLs here, we basically have 4 different products: a CLI product, an Android product, an iOS one, and the desktop one. And the CLI repository also contains the thing that I spend most of my time working on, which is the measurement engine. That is like all the algorithms and all the code that decides how to measure the blocking of things over the internet. I am going now to show you some screenshots of the Android application. And I'm going to show you those screenshots in a way that will mirror your user experience. And I will try to do that in a way that builds up a good understanding of what data we are talking about. So let's start from this one on the left. And this is the dashboard. This is when you open UniProbe, what you see. And you have a button here that says run, which allows you to run all the experiments that UniProbe implements. Those experiments are grouped into groups, and you see here a website group, then we have instant messaging, circumvention, etc., etc. And you can also run those individually if you wish, because the report that I'm going to discuss is based on the blocking of websites in Russia. We only need to concern ourselves today with the website's suite of experiments. And then this leads me to the second screenshot. So when you're running UniProbe and you're doing that manually, this is what you see. And interesting for us, and this point is this name here, Web Connectivity Test, which is the name of the methodology that we use to measure the blocking of websites. Then the second part that is probably interesting to highlight here is that there are URLs, websites that we are measuring, and we are going to slowly build the full picture. Okay, let's see what happens at the end of the test. So at the end of the test, you have a new entry in the results. So this is another kind of screen, and then you see the information that we have about you, which is we know the name of the ISP. So in this case, with my home, Vodafone Italia SPA, and then the autonomous system number, and then the country. And if we dive a little bit deeper, we will be able to see what has been measured. So the summary, okay, here it says, okay, 4 test websites, 4 accessible, and those are the websites that we test. And yeah, obviously this flag here indicates that all was good, and I'm going to explain what it means for us to say that something is good. But the important part here is that there is this list of URLs, and there are these icons. And so where do these URL come from, and what do these icons mean, which is also part of our testing methodology? Well, when you're starting to test, what happens is that the application asks to our backend to give it suitable URLs in context, where context means your country and your ISP number. And based on that, you receive a list of things to test. And then basically each URL has a category code, which we will discuss in a second. And then the measurement function is like a Lambda function that takes in input the URL and does something with the network, and then tries to determine if this URL is accessible or blocked in your context. And on this right-hand screenshot in here, you see more details about it, including the possibility of seeing the measurement inside UniExplorer, which we will shortly see. Now, to expand on the categories, there are several categories, and you, as a user, you can choose which categories you would like to test. By default, all of them. But in this example screenshot, I chose to disable testing websites related to economics. And then general users can choose what they would like to test. And then when we are asking to our backend to get URLs, we take those preferences into account. To conclude this initial overview of the app, I just want to say that I showed you what happens when you're running tests yourself manually, but the bulk of the measurements that we collect comes through automated testing, which is an option that users have. And if they choose to do so, they can also control when to run automated testing. You can see here, like, only on Wi-Fi, yes, no, only while charging, yes, no. And that's how we collected the measurements that we will be discussing and that relate to Russia. Now, on to another topic, UniExplorer. So UniPro runs, collects measurements, sends it to the backend processes measurements, and we show them. And UniExplorer has a view, which is, I would say, its most ancient view, which is called search. And search basically gives you a bunch of controls, such as the country, the autonomous system number, dates, and the task name, etc. And then you see all the measurements. And you remember that I told you web connectivity is the name of our website's testing methodology. And so you see this, but there are also other kind of testing that we do, such as this one is related to the STAN protocol. And then you can, if you click or tap on an individual row, you can see details of the measurement. And this is very similar to the app. However, there is a difference. And the difference is that when we submit measurements to our backend, we can process and reprocess them with our backend, which means that we can apply knowledge about our whole body of data to the measurement itself, including detecting known fingerprints which are associated with blocking. So, for example, in many jurisdictions, including mine, when you access a website that is blocked, it may happen that you see a web page that says, this website has been blocked because of this court order or because of this law. So we have fingerprints for that. And when we detect this kind of fingerprints, we classify the measurement as censorship. This is what we call fingerprint-based censorship classification. And there are also cases where IP addresses are associated with censorship, and we do the same. And like in general, the take-home message here is that the backend has a unique opportunity to enrich the measurement, correct mistakes that older versions of UniProbe may have made, etc., etc. Now, another feature of UniExplorer that is what we mostly use when we produce research reports is MAT charts. Now, MAT means Measurement Aggregation Toolkit. And here you can find an example of using the MAT. So this is a chart produced with the MAT. And in this example, I selected twitter.com as the target, the web methodology as the methodology that we want to filter for, and China as the country. And then you see we have an x-axis with dates. Each date as a column, was height, is the number of measurements collected in the given and selected context per day. And then we have colors. And those colors, like obviously the relative size of colors reflects the relative size of measurements that were classified in some specific way. And this is the most coarse-grained classification that we can apply to measurements. So we are going to use this kind of tool in a bit when we look at censorship in Russia during the first year of the war. Therefore, let me explain what those mean. So while the probe is, while Uniprobe is testing, so when it is in this state here, there is a step in testing a single URL in which it contacts backend services that either perform the same measurement concurrently, or if there is a cached recent version, return results of a recent version. Which means that Uniprobe, at the end of measuring a single URL, has two distinct bits of data. A, what it itself has observed, and B, the control measurement. And then by combining these two bits of information, we can do this kind of rough classification where, okay, so green means that both Uniprobe and the control measurement were able to access the website, fetch a web page, and some properties of the web page fetched by both match. Therefore, we conclude the website was accessible. Then we have another state, which is confirmed. So you remember I told you we have fingerprints, and confirmed is the state in which we have detected fingerprints, and therefore we know that, I don't know, like there was a web page saying this content is blocked in Italy because of this law or something like that. Then we have a third state, and this third state is called anomaly. So we say anomaly when one of those two cases happen. The first case is that while the control measurement performed by our backend could access the website and fetch a web page, either case one, Uniprobe could not really establish a connection or use it, or case B, the features of the web page that we have got are so different from the original one that something seems off. So in those cases, we say anomaly. And the main difference between confirmed and anomaly is that we automatically flag confirm, whereas anomaly requires some level of user, developer, researcher intervention to make sure they're not false positives and everything is in order. And then finally, we have failure cases, and there are several reasons for failure. One reason that I can flag here is if our backend is overloaded, then it does not hand over URLs. Other cases of failure are a bit more like proper failures, such as consider a website that is misconfigured, where the TLS certificate has expired, so you cannot access content, and both probe and the backend will not be able to access that. So those are the four classes for the first most coarse-grained level of classification, and we are going to use this tool for discussing Russia. Now, before really going into the report, I need to add two more bits of information to the mix. The first one is that I told you that we are fetching URLs from our backend, and the question probably arises where those URLs come from. And I'm not going to answer this. So historically, the answer is from this GitHub repository, which had been started by the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto, and now is co-maintained by us and them. And there are several researchers worldwide who help us to keep those lists up to date. Conceptually speaking, those lists are CSV files where for each URL we indicate a bunch of metadata, and then, as I told you before, a category. Over the years, we started building abstractions on top of this simple set of CSVs. One of these abstractions is the task list editor that you can see here. So This is for Italy, my country, and you see that we have URLs, there are categories. Several URLs in Italy are for file sharing because there was like a semi-official list of URLs blocked for file sharing, so we imported it, as you can see here. And then what I can do if I'm editing the test list through this interface is that I can like tap here and edit. So I don't know, for example, I know that this website is now using a new domain, and then I can change that. Or now the website is only and chiefly using HTTPS, and then I can change just the protocol. Or maybe another website does not exist anymore, is not relevant anymore, I can delete it, or I can add websites here and then not. Whatever change I made, this interface translates that in a pull request to the original repository containing CSVs. And our backend is periodically importing those CSVs and serving URLs to users. Now, how does that work? Well, historically, a long time ago, it worked like that. If you were in, let's say, India, we were loading the whole task list for India. The global list, which contains URLs that have a global significance, we were squashing them together, we were sorting them randomly, and then sending them to Uniprobe. However, that was the past, and over time, we made at least two changes. The first change is that we reckoned that we wanted to have uniform coverage across URLs. That became more and more important as we were implementing automated measurements in the background, which I showed you before. And so the first change was like, okay, let's try to serve URLs such that in the same ISP and the same country, we try to get uniform coverage across all of them. But then after we did that, we also realized that we needed more control. And there were cases, and we are going to see those cases in data for Russia, for example, where we really wanted to prioritize specific categories or URLs. So now the algorithm is more complex, and it's basically, we can assign category priorities to categories, and then we try to evenly spread the coverage among categories, but then also some URLs can have even higher categories. And this is what we call URL prioritization. Now, this is, okay, this is the last topic that I need to touch upon before discussing together the report. You remember this name? I mentioned it already a couple of times. This is the web measurement methodology that we are currently using. So this is the URL of the specification. And there is indeed this specification on GitHub, which explains the purpose and at a high level, the algorithm. Now, I'm trying to give you an idea of the algorithm by showing you what would happen in a specific example case. The first concept to keep in mind is that the name web connectivity already gives out part of the reasoning behind this algorithm. Web and connectivity. In fact, we have a connectivity part of the experiment and the web part of the experiment. And so let's try to go together and see what happens if we want to measure example.com using HTTPS. We start into the connectivity part, and we use get@info, which is a system, an operating system API to access the DNS resolver configured into the system. And this gives us IP addresses or an error. And then in this case, I'm assuming it gives us IP addresses, which is, well, easier because it allows me to explain how everything works. This line here with fork basically means that we start parallel operations, and we have, in this case, 3 parallel threads of operation. For each IP address that we discovered, we try to establish a TCP connection, so here and here, and then if that's successful, we try to perform a TLS handshake, and then this tells us whether we can access the website, whether we have TCP connectivity, whether the DNS is allowing us to do something with it, and then whether we can have a TLS channel, so That's the connectivity part. At the same time, there is this specific, let's say, thread of execution where we are invoking an API of our backend, and we are passing to this API all the information we have. So the URL we want to measure, the IP addresses we discover, and this API is going to perform more or less the same operations and return to us compatible data that we can then compare to determine whether it was possible to access the website or not. And then we simply wait for all these operations to be done. And then we start the web part, which is quite different. And the web part is like, okay, we have data, that's very good, but let's start from the beginning. Let's create a pristine HTTP client and let's give it the URL, and it will give us a web page or an error. And then we also get a web page. Now, at the end, what we are going to do is basically to compare the DNS results that we probably seen with the DNS results in the test helper, and all the TCP and TLS results together, and then the web pages that they both fetched to determine if it's plausible that there was no censorship. I would also like to add that this algorithm is what I think we can call at this point the classic algorithm. On top of this, we have layered other stuff, but I think it's best to omit it because A, those changes happen after the report that we are discussing, and B, those changes make it more complex, but at the end of the day, the underlying principle is still this. So I think it's totally fine that you roll with this classic algorithm to reason about what's happening. And then with that, we finally go into the report proper. Now, the report was written by us in collaboration with Roskom Svoboda. Roskom Svoboda is an organization in Russia that fights for internet freedom. The report was written at this point, I think 19 days ago, last year, like, well, no, 1 year minus 19 days. So it's basically 1 year old. And the motivation for writing the report is that right after the beginning of the war, around 1 month after that, we wrote a report about how censorship increased in Russia since the beginning. And then last year, after 1 year has passed, we wanted to write a more comprehensive report, taking a look at all that changed since then. And the TLDR is what was blocked before is still blocked. More websites were blocked, and we are going in the rest of my presentation to take a look at some of this blocking and to take a look at the methodologies which blocking was happening. Though, before this, I want to take a little detour on the policy side and explain to you how censorship is implemented from the policy side in Russia. Obviously, humor me, I'm not a policy person, but I will try my best to summarize what we wrote in the report. So the body that oversees, let's say, information controls in Russia is Roskomnadzor, which is the telecommunication authority of Russia. There is a publicly available unified register of all the IP addresses, domain names, and URLs that should be blocked in Russia. And in this report, in collaboration with Roskom Svoboda, we started with analyzing additions to this public list. And that's 2022, right? So the war started sometime around here. And what we noticed is that the process of adding URLs to this block list, this public block list, changed its properties since the beginning of the war, so to speak, and the number of resources that were blocked jumped up a little bit and stayed mostly constant until when it had this spike in October, then dropped a bit in November and a bit more in December. But the TLDR is there was an acceleration on the number of things that were blocked. And one of the reasons why this happened is that due to the state of war, there were new laws that gave administrative bodies in Russia additional scope for blocking resources. And I think it's useful to also look at the same data from another angle. So it's true that the law says that courts can decide what can be blocked according to the law, but it's not just the courts. So here we have this chart, which is a breakdown of all that was ordered to be blocked in 2022, and it is broken down by the entity that has been recorded to requesting the blocking. So you see that there are courts, but there's more. So for once, Roskomnadzor itself has the power to block. Then other administrative entities like the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Ministry of Communication, etc., they can all add to this registry. And there are some categories, I don't know, like by heart, I remember defamation, like websites that are considered defamation of the armed forces can be added to the list. And it's also interesting to note that in some cases, like more than 3,000, it was not registered which was the body that requested the addition. Okay, now with this, we have finished our policy detour and we can go back into the data. I will first show you some high-level results, and those results are purely based on fingerprinting, so just automatic characterization. And obviously, I told you about our test list, so it's only based on the test list. And this is a view where we try to show all the categories in the task list that contain blocked websites. So the number here is the number of blocked websites in a category. And it would be tempting by looking at this to say that news media was the category where there was the most intention of blocking, but no. So the main message of this chart is that there was pervasive blocking. I told you that we have categories in the task list, and we have 30 categories, and there are 28 bubbles here. So the main message is widespread categories. But then why I say that the idea of saying news media was the most censored could probably be misleading? Well, because we can, because of this chart, basically. So what we put in here on the x-axis is the category in the task list. So news, for example, human rights, hosting provider, etc. And then the number of domains in that category which has sufficient coverage, where sufficient coverage means more than 1,000 measurements over the observation period. And because, for one, not all categories have the same number of URLs, and additionally, we chose to prioritize some of them, obviously this has skewed the results. That's why I basically said the main takeaway is pervasive censorship across all categories. We are now reaching the end of the presentation. I would like to conclude by showing some notable changes in blocking over time, and also to go a little bit more in depth and characterize some cases of censorship and explain what was happening. So, first of all, quick overview. Human rights websites were blocked during the period. And then investigative journalism and news media also were blocked. And then we had some cases where we were not 100% sure, but others, such as SoundCloud and Patreon, where we were much more sure. The whole report discussed all these cases in detail and explains for each of them what we think about them. What I want to do right now is to show you some cases. So the first case is hrw.org, so Human Rights Watch. And this chart is a map chart, which I showed you before. So you remember, we have dates on the y-axis. The height is the number of measurements per day. And then what you see here is that we have this huge transition and very quick from OK, which meant we were able to access the website from Russia, to anomaly, which means Uniprob could not access it anymore, but our control servers could. And what's interesting here is that, so the war started around the end of February, and it took a little bit for censorship to pick it up, but then when it did, it was quite in the same day. Let's see another case. So this second case was Instagram.com. And so the first thing to notice here is that Instagram started being blocked much earlier, right? Like Human Rights Watch was blocked around the mid of April, whereas here we are like in the second week of March. The other thing I want you to pay attention to is prioritization. So you see that here we were around 200 measurements per day, and then it jumped up. So this is explained by more usage of Unipro, but also we changed and tweaked a little bit the prioritization because we wanted to have more data. We knew that something was already ongoing, which was the war, because at this point the war was already started. And then we accordingly tweaked our priorities. And you see that we basically in 1 day or 2 days, it all went yellow and we started to add anomalies also for Instagram.com. This is the final case I want to discuss. I think it's pronounced Rodmaske. I hope so. It's a website. It's an independent media website in Ukraine. And interestingly, this one started being censored before the official beginning of the war. And the story is more or less the same. We transition from OK to Anomaly. And to conclude, and give you like even more low-level details about it, I want to show you a breakdown of some of the failures. So rather than using this for kind of buckets classification, I want to show you more about the real errors. This is a part of a larger picture where we were basically describing for each autonomous system in which we tested over a period. So this is basically an ISP, another one, etc. And we wanted to classify in a more fine-grained way the results. So you have here on the right a histogram, which shows the amount of measurements collected for each autonomous system number. And then let's take a look at what was happening. So OK still means OK, nothing changed. However, we basically exploded the yellow that we have here. So in more colors and more details. So we have a bunch of TLS failures. This one is quite typical of censorship for TLS-based censorship. And this receiving a connection reset during the TLS handshake, which means you started handshaking and you're sending out the name of the service that you would like to access, and that's clear text. And the censorship equipment reacts by sending you a reset request, which tears down the connection immediately. Similar is this timeout, which is basically you start handshaking and then you send out this client hello with the server name indication, and then nothing happens. And then eventually you're like, OK, this handshake is not going anywhere, I will timeout. Or we have end of file errors, which is similar to reset, except the connection is closed. Some certificate errors, which means the handshake arrives to its end, but then we cannot use our certificate pool, which is derived from the Mozilla one, to validate the certificate. So something was very off there. And then we have a bunch of DNS errors, where MX domain, which we can see here, means that we receive a reply that says this domain does not exist, which is not true, but still that's what we receive. Or other temporary failures of DNS, which is basically another way to say timeout. And also we had some cases where, where are they? Yes, here. So some cases where the connection was refused, which seems to suggest that there was blocking related to either the IP address or the IP address and the TCP port together. So the three tuple. And yeah, so with that, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. And yeah, this is those are my contacts, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm ready to get questions. Did I stop sharing? Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Simon. That's an excellent presentation. Lots of details, and clearly explain your methodology and the results so well. Thank you. So, folks, if you have any questions, please enter them in your Q&A. You can also raise your hands if you want to speak. I'll start with a simple question. Could you also shed some light on, especially in the Russia case, what is the technical mechanisms that they are using for this censorship? I know that it's very difficult to measure based on your tool, because that's not going to tell you what are the actual techniques they are using. But do you have any details that you could share, especially in Russia case?
Yeah, so it's not exactly something that I personally have worked on, but I tend to read research papers in this area, so I can give you a quick overview. So what we know about Russia is that unlike countries such as China, where they have a centralized set of choke points to leave the network, the internet grew in a more unstructured way. Therefore, there are several ways to leave the country which depend on business agreements, etc. However, there has been a change in the law, if I'm not wrong, in 2022, that mandated that ISPs included specific equipment. Was acronym I don't fully remember, but it's in the report, something like TPSC or something like that. With this equipment needs to be installed, and this equipment contains all the capabilities to censor, and it is possible through this equipment to distribute blocking rules across ISPs. So it's not topologically hierarchical, but still there is the possibility of doing a coordination that makes it look like coordinated.
Yeah, thanks. Off to you, Nalini.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for a great presentation, Simone. One question I have, and I guess you're not making your URL list public, I assume for a reason, the automated one. But, you know I've done a little bit of work in like the whole child sex abuse business, and the stuff that's blocked. I mean, people don't do they don't have the main website being, this is my child porn website, and they have like, this is a very nice website that has nothing, bad in it. And then you go 3 steps down and this is where the bad material is. And so I'm just curious, is like, you see what I mean? It's like a number of levels down and only certain images and so on are to be blocked. Do I make sense to you?
Oh yeah, what you say makes sense to me. I can try to explain a little bit better what we do though. So we actually have a public repository where you can see all the URLs, and you can also infer our URLs if you look at the measurements. The URLs that we have generally do not, all the URLs that we have are mostly political, religious. There is some pornography, but in general, it does not 110% nothing to do with those cases. What we are interested about is to have URLs that make sense for a censor to block in a context of a country. So Instagram.com, we spend all our time testing this kind of stuff. I understand though that your point is, you will correct me if wrong, but I think your point is, given a perfectly okay website, you can have a specific web page that is questionable. Therefore, it might be that the censorship rules only relate to that URL and not to the whole website. I assume that was the high level question, right? Perfect.
Correct.
Okay. So that's a fantastic question. The answer to this is the following. There has been a transition towards encryption, which means that if you look into our test list, we have a mixture of HTTP and HTTPS results. When you are censoring encrypted websites, the most common case is that the censor would interfere with the TLS handshake, with the TCP endpoints, or will throttle you a lot, so you are not able to use the website. On the other hand, if we are dealing with clear text URLs, then the most common way to censor, there are DNS ways, but focusing purely on the protocol, is to have some kind of proxies that they look at stuff like the URL or the host header or stuff like that. So those are 2 different kinds of censorship. And originally, the test list had several specific URLs that pointed to stuff that was blocked. Going by memory, there was related to India, there was an article on an Indian online newspaper, and the whole URL was blocked, not just the home page. However, due to the transition to encryption, this is a bit less relevant, and it is more relevant to detect TLS blocking. But I didn't discuss probably very in detail what happens for unencrypted URLs. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, sure. No, I was just thinking, I know this is not your use case, but I think your product can be used very well for another use case, which is, because if you can you just give it a list of, that's the input to your product. And so you could give it a specific URL or a specific image rather than the whole base URL itself. That's just what I was thinking. Yeah.
We can absolutely do that.
Yeah.
In fact, when we want to detect throttling, we tend to give URLs of images or downloads and stuff like that, which allows us to say if the speed at which we download is compatible or not with the normal speed.
Sure. No, great presentation. If there's nothing else, the other thing, I work in the whole TLS area, so this is curious to me, and also web testing. And I know, like, sometimes we'll see like TLS errors, or you can even do like, like if you ask for TLS 1.3, it'll say cannot do. I'm going to make you go TLS 1.0, or like also like a web page can have many different things, many different connections. One or two might fail, but others go through. You see what I mean? So it's a very, very tricky thing. My hats are off to you. As I say, we work in this too. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Made the usual Zoom mistake. So what's the most easiest way to get your hands on this ONI probe that you have, and folks who are interested, can they try these things out, could look at measurements?
So absolutely. So to install ONI probe, I'm sharing in the chat the link is uni.org/install. Then if you want to hack on the code base, I think the repository of the CLI is the best one, because that's where we implement all the measurement methodologies. And then if you instead like the backend more, we have a very predictable URL, which is uni/backend. But it is.
Okay, thanks a lot for a very interested talk. Folks, so this is it. If anybody has any questions, not even a question to Simone, if they want to talk and share their experience with tech and policy intersection space, this is your time. Don't be shy. We have maybe 5 minutes and then we will close. So if anybody wants to have the last word, please feel free, raise your hands. We'll give you access. Otherwise, we'll say our goodbyes. I don't see anybody rushing in. So thank you. Thanks to our speakers. And we will see everyone tomorrow for IPv6 at the same time. Bye.